In Tokyo, a young woman captures the exact same breakfast photo 47 times before posting it on social media, simply because, in one frame, the plate has a tiny chip on the rim. She deletes them all, edits, and retakes, until there is no trace left of imperfection. A few hundred kilometers away, in a small pottery workshop in Kyoto, an old craftsman is doing the exact opposite with a broken bowl. He doesn't hide the cracks. He is tracing them with gold, intentionally making them clear, prominent, and impossible to ignore. Welcome back to the channel. The technique he is practicing is called Kintsugi, the art of repairing broken pottery with gold lacquer. But behind it lies a much broader philosophy of life, which the Japanese call Wabi-Sabi. And today, I want to place it side by side with a disease that is quietly spreading among the younger generation: perfectionism. Wabi-Sabi is composed of two words. Wabi originally carried the meaning of solitude, simplicity, and a certain flaw. Sabi means the trace of time, the fading, rusting, and wearing away of things. Put together, Wabi-Sabi is the beauty of things imperfect, impermanent, and incomplete. This concept originated from the 16th century Japanese tea ceremony, deeply tied to the tea master Sen no Rikyu. While the nobility of that era was obsessed with flawless, polished Chinese porcelain, Rikyu chose rustic, warped, and unevenly colored clay bowls to prepare tea. He believed that it was precisely this imperfection that allowed people to truly be present in the moment, instead of being caught up in admiring a distant, frozen beauty that felt untouched and untouchable. For over 400 years after, Wabi-Sabi seeped into every corner of Japanese life, from architecture and poetry to the way people view aging, decay, and death. But on the other side of the world, a completely different story was unfolding. The young woman in Tokyo we met at the beginning is not an isolated case. She is one of millions of young people around the globe growing up in a culture that worships perfection, where every picture must be filtered, and every resume must be flawless. Psychologist Thomas Curran at the University of Bath has spent years studying this. He discovered that the levels of perfectionism in young people have increased significantly through each generation, from the 1980s until today. It is no longer just about wanting to do well. It is a punitive form of perfectionism, the belief that one is only worthy of love and acceptance when making absolutely zero mistakes, in their work, their appearance, or their very life. Social media amplifies this tenfold. Every scroll through the news feed is a moment of comparison. Someone else's kitchen is tidier, someone else's body is fitter, someone else's career is smoother, even though most of what we see is just a meticulously curated frame. And the paradox is, the harder young people try to reach that perfection, the more exhausted they become. Curran's research shows a clear link between perfectionism and the rising rates of anxiety, depression, and burnout in this generation. There is an ironic truth: society often praises perfectionism as a virtue, a sign of ambition, dedication, and meticulousness. But behind it, most of the time, lies not a desire to grow, but a deep fear of having one's flaws exposed. So the question arises: if a culture has lived with a philosophy that treasures imperfection for over 400 years and still survived, even thrived, then perhaps perfection has never been a prerequisite for something to truly have value. He mixes pure gold powder with traditional lacquer, then carefully paints along every fracture. When finished, the bowl no longer looks the way it did before breaking. It looks different, and to many Japanese pottery connoisseurs, it becomes more beautiful and more valuable. Contrast this with the way young people today often treat their own mistakes, hiding them, erasing them, feeling ashamed, and trying to act as if they never happened, as if a fracture is something that must be eradicated entirely, rather than a part of the narrative. Meanwhile, modern psychotherapists, though they don't use the word wabi-sabi, are talking about something very close to it: the ability to accept one's own flaws, self-compassion, which has been proven to be one of the strongest protective factors against anxiety and depression. Researcher Kristen Neff, a pioneer in this field, discovered that individuals with high self-compassion, rather than harsh self-criticism, bounce back faster after failure, and paradoxically, tend to achieve more sustainable success in the long run. In other words, what Japanese tea masters intuited 400 years ago, modern psychological science is only now beginning to prove with data. Accepting imperfection does not make us weaker. It makes us more resilient. And this is the core of what modern perfectionism gets entirely wrong about value. A perfect object is a finished object. It has nothing left to become. But an object that bears traces, chipped, faded, mended, is still telling an ongoing story. A Kintsugi bowl is not just a broken bowl that was repaired. It is a bowl that lived through a crisis, and carries that crisis with it openly and proudly, instead of trying to erase it from its own history. Wabi-Sabi, therefore, never teaches us to give up or accept sloppiness. It teaches something much more subtle, that true beauty does not lie in never breaking, but in how something, or someone, continues to exist and hold meaning after it has broken. If we apply that to ourselves, the question is no longer how to never make a mistake, but rather, which fracture in my life, if viewed honestly, is actually my proudest golden seam? It could be the failure that forced you to change your career path, the broken relationship that taught you how to love better, or simply a difficult phase you walked through, which now makes you more empathetic toward others. The girl in Tokyo we met at the beginning of the video, after her 47th attempt, finally puts her phone down. She looks back at the very first photo, the one with the chipped plate, and for the first time, she doesn't delete it. She posts it, just like that. Not because she suddenly stopped caring about the quality of her life, but because she realized that tiny chip did not lessen the value of that morning, the aroma of the coffee, the sunlight streaming through the window, the quiet moment before starting a new day. You don't need to be an expert in Japanese pottery to live by the spirit of Wabi-Sabi. You only need to start with one small thing. The next time you are about to delete, edit, or hide something imperfect about yourself, pause for a second and ask yourself if it really needs to disappear. So tell me, what fracture in your life, if you look closely, might actually be your own golden seam? Write your answer in the comments. Thank you for staying until the very end of this video. See you next time.